At the grandest gala in Accra, Kwame Obeng, the arrogant billionaire, raised his glass and smirked at the glittering crowd. He pulled out his unlimited black card, flashing it like a trophy. "Buy anything you desire," he declared, handing it to 3 women. First was Adoa, his glamorous fiancée, dressed in diamonds already. Second was Amma, the sharp and ambitious daughter of his greatest rival. And last was Efua, the shy maid who had been carrying trays of champagne, her uniform patched and her eyes lowered. Gasps filled the room. A billionaire offering his card to a maid? Kwame's lips curled into a challenge. "Show me your worth," he said loudly enough for all to hear. The audience laughed, amused at the spectacle. Of course Adoa would splurge on jewels, and Amma would scheme her way into something clever. But Efua? Everyone turned to stare at her worn shoes and tired hands. "She'll probably buy bread for her village," Adoa sneered, sending ripples of laughter through the hall. The maid's face flushed, but she did not answer. With quiet dignity, Efua bowed, accepted the card, and walked away without a word. Her silence seemed to echo louder than the music. Whispers followed her like shadows. "She doesn't even know what to do with it," someone joked. The crowd moved on with their gossip and champagne, never imagining that the quiet maid who left the room that night would soon hold in her hands the power to change their world. Adoa did not waste a second. The moment the black card touched her hand, she lifted her chin high and walked out of the gala as if the whole city belonged to her. The driver opened the car door, and she ordered him straight to the most expensive boutique in Accra. The glass doors opened wide, and the staff rushed to greet her, bowing and calling her by name. Everyone knew she was the billionaire's fiancée. With a flick of her manicured hand, she began her spree. She pointed at diamond necklaces that sparkled like stars, and the shop assistants wrapped them in velvet boxes without even asking for the price. She slipped into couture dresses one after another, twirling in front of the mirror while the staff clapped. Shoes with red bottoms, handbags that cost more than houses, and gowns made for royalty, she picked them all. Every swipe of the black card felt like music to her ears. But Adoa was not only buying for herself. She made sure the world was watching. Out came her phone. On Instagram, she posted pictures of herself draped in diamonds, captions filled with hashtags like #RichLife and #FutureMrsBillionaire. Her followers flooded the comments with heart emojis and envy. "This is how a real queen lives," one fan wrote. Gossip blogs picked up her posts within minutes, spreading her shopping spree across the city like wildfire. Back at the boutique, customers whispered as she passed. "She knows how to live rich," one woman said in awe. Others clapped softly, treating her like a celebrity. The more they admired her, the higher she walked on her heels. She basked in the attention, every laugh and every compliment feeding her pride. When she finally returned to the gala, arms full of glossy shopping bags, the crowd surrounded her. They gasped at the jewelry glittering on her neck and wrists, the designer logos shining like trophies. Adoa smiled, soaking in the applause. She looked at Kwame with a proud sparkle in her eyes, as if to say, "See, I make you look good." Kwame leaned back in his chair, his lips curling into a smug smirk. He loved the spectacle, loved how his fiancée showed off his wealth to the world. For him, her extravagance was proof of his own power. The guests clapped again, praising her as the perfect match for a billionaire. "Adoa is born for this life," someone whispered. She smiled wider, her confidence glowing brighter than the diamonds around her neck. In that moment, she felt untouchable, as if nothing and no one could take her crown. What she didn't know, as the applause filled the room, was that her dazzling display was only the beginning of a game far bigger than diamonds, hashtags, or couture. A game where her glittering purchases would soon mean nothing at all. Amma held the black card carefully, not like a toy or a piece of jewelry, but like a weapon. Her dark eyes sparkled, not with vanity, but with calculation. Unlike Adoa, who rushed for diamonds and dresses, Amma was in no hurry. She sat back in her chair, her lips curling into a sly smile as the crowd watched her. Everyone expected her to run to the shops too, but Amma had grown up in the shadow of her father, Kwame's greatest rival. She had learned that money could buy more than jewels. Money could buy power. With calm steps, she left the gala and headed straight for her father's office, where her laptop waited. She logged into the stock market with steady fingers, her mind already racing ahead. She knew which companies were rising, which brands were gaining, and which investments would make a splash in the society pages. Her choice was bold: shares in a world-famous luxury brand, the same brand half the women in the gala were wearing on their shoulders and feet. Instead of flaunting wealth like Adoa, Amma was planting seeds of empire. News of her purchase spread quickly. Within hours, whispers filled the party halls. Did you hear? Amma didn't buy jewels, she bought stocks. People raised their eyebrows in admiration. That girl has a business brain, someone whispered. Another said, she may be the better match for Kwame. Imagine their power together. The comparison to Adoa began to sting. While Adoa posted diamonds on Instagram, Amma was already building a future. When Amma returned to the gala, she walked in without a single shopping bag. The crowd leaned closer, curious. What did you buy? A woman asked. Amma smiled softly, letting the silence build. Then she answered, shares in the brand you're all wearing. The room gasped, impressed by her cunning. Some even clapped. Adoa's face tightened, her fingers clutching her diamonds, as if afraid they suddenly looked cheap. Kwame sat back, watching the drama unfold like a show made just for him. He chuckled, his eyes shining with amusement. He loved the spectacle, two women fighting not just for attention, but for his approval. Adoa sparkled on the outside, but Amma was showing him something deeper: strategy, intelligence, ambition. The kind of qualities he respected in business. Whispers grew louder around the room. Amma is dangerous, someone murmured. She could even replace Adoa. The words floated through the air like sparks, feeding the tension. Adoa's smile faltered, but Amma's confidence only grew. She looked at Kwame as if daring him to acknowledge her power. Kwame raised his glass, smirking. To him, it was entertainment, a battle of beauty versus brains. He enjoyed every second of it, never realizing that the quietest woman in the game, the maid who had walked out in silence, would soon outplay them all. For now, the crowd's eyes were fixed on Amma, the rival's daughter who had turned a single purchase into a statement of power. Efua stood frozen for a moment when the black card was handed to her. The glittering chandeliers above seemed too bright, the laughter around her too sharp. She could feel every pair of eyes in the hall burning into her patched uniform, her worn shoes, and her tired hands. She was just the maid, the girl who carried trays of drinks and bowed her head when spoken to. Now, with the billionaire's card in her hand, she was the center of attention. But not the kind that made her proud. The crowd erupted in laughter, their voices dripping with cruelty. Adoa tossed her hair and smirked, her diamonds flashing under the light. She'll probably buy bread for her village, she said loudly, making sure everyone heard. The hall shook with more laughter. Some people covered their mouths, pretending to be polite, but others laughed openly, pointing at Efua's faded dress and calloused fingers. The music from the orchestra seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of mockery that echoed in Efua's ears. But Efua did not answer. She did not defend herself, did not even frown. Instead, she bowed her head gently, her voice soft but steady as she said, "Thank you, sir," to Kwame. Her calmness unsettled a few, but most continued to giggle, convinced she had no idea what to do with the card. Clutching it tightly in her hand, Efua walked out of the glittering hall. Her back was straight, her steps unhurried, her silence louder than any insult thrown at her. The guests watched her leave, their whispers chasing her like shadows. Where could she even go? Maybe she'll buy soap and rice. She won't even dare swipe it. The laughter followed her until the doors closed behind her. Inside the hall, Adoa leaned against Kwame with a triumphant smile. Amma smirked too, convinced that the maid's silence proved her unworthy. "She'll never come back," someone muttered, and many agreed. To them, Efua was nothing more than a servant given a toy she could not use. Kwame himself chuckled, shaking his head. He thought he had given her a chance to embarrass herself, and she had played right into his game. The idea of a maid with his black card was amusing, nothing more. The guests clinked glasses, the music swelled again, and the laughter blended back into gossip. Soon they forgot her, their eyes returning to Adoa's glitter and Amma's clever smirk. But outside those doors, Efua's silence carried a weight no one could yet see. She held the black card against her chest, her mind steady and clear. She had no desire to compete with diamonds or stocks. She knew exactly what she would buy. And while the crowd inside dismissed her as foolish, Efua was already taking her first quiet step toward changing the game forever. The next morning, the grand doors of Kwame Obeng's estate opened wide. The three women walked in, each carrying the weight of their choices. Adoa was the first to make her entrance, dressed in a gown fresh from her spree, her neck heavy with diamonds that sparkled like tiny suns. She walked with confidence, swinging her designer bags in her hands, smiling as though she had already won. Amma followed, calmer, sharper. She carried no bags, only a slim folder tucked under her arm, the proof of her smart investment. And then came Efua, the maid, walking quietly in her same patched uniform, holding nothing but the black card and a folded receipt. Kwame sat at the head of the long golden table, sipping his coffee slowly, his eyes glinting with amusement. Around him, a circle of curious guests and business partners waited eagerly to hear what each woman had done. He raised his hand, and the game began. Adoa stood proudly, showing off her jewels. "I bought beauty," she announced, flashing her diamond necklace under the lights. The guests clapped and admired her extravagance. "She knows how to live rich," someone whispered. Kwame smirked, pleased. Next, Amma placed her folder on the table and opened it. "I bought stocks in a luxury brand," she said with confidence. She explained how her choice was not for show but for growth, how her money would multiply in time. Murmurs filled the room. Many nodded, impressed by her business mind. "That girl has vision," an old man muttered. Kwame chuckled, his eyes dancing with pride at her boldness. Then all eyes turned to Efua. She stepped forward slowly, her head bowed but her voice steady. She handed back the black card and placed the crumpled receipt on the table. Kwame raised an eyebrow. The guests leaned in, curious. "And you?" he asked. "I bought land," Efua said softly. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted into laughter. "Land?" someone scoffed. "What kind of land?" Kwame asked, leaning forward. Efua met his gaze calmly. "A small piece of farmland outside Accra," she answered. The reaction was immediate. People burst into laughter, clapping their hands in mockery. Adoa nearly doubled over, tears forming in her eyes. "A farm?" she gasped between laughs. She could have bought diamonds, cars, even a house, and she chose dirt. Amma shook her head, her lips curling in pity. "Foolish girl," someone muttered. Another guest said loudly, "She is simple, uneducated. She wasted the chance of a lifetime." Kwame leaned back in his chair, chuckling with the rest. The room buzzed with insults and laughter, everyone treating Efua's choice as nothing but a joke. Yet Efua did not flinch. She stood silently, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes calm as if she could already see something the others could not. While the room mocked her, she remained steady, holding the secret of a purchase that would soon shake the walls of Kwame's empire. Weeks passed, and the memory of Efua's strange purchase became nothing more than gossip. People laughed about it at parties, joking that the maid had traded a billionaire's card for a patch of dry soil. Adoa wore her diamonds everywhere, proud to be the one who looked the richest. Amma spoke boldly about her stocks, showing graphs and numbers to anyone who would listen. But Efua stayed silent, working quietly in the background, never defending herself, never explaining her choice. To everyone else, she was still just the maid who wasted her chance. Then one morning, headlines shook the entire city. Gold reserve discovered outside Accra. The news spread like fire. Television screens showed reporters standing on a piece of crumbling farmland, the same land everyone had laughed at weeks before. The camera zoomed in on the dusty ground where experts had uncovered shining veins of gold. And the owner of that land, with full mineral rights, was none other than Efua, the maid. Phones rang, blogs exploded, and whispers turned into screams. Is it true? The maid owns it. Shock rippled through high society. The very land Kwame's empire had been chasing for years, the land his lawyers and businessmen had tried to secure, now belonged to the quiet girl everyone mocked. With one simple purchase, Efua had outsmarted them all. At his estate, Kwame's face hardened as the news was confirmed. His advisors rushed in, speaking quickly about losses, risks, and collapsing shares. His empire, built over years of cunning deals, now faced a threat he never saw coming, a maid with the power to crush or control him. He clenched his jaw, remembering the moment she had bowed politely and walked out with his card. What he thought was a joke had turned into his greatest nightmare. Meanwhile, Adoa's diamonds suddenly felt heavy around her neck, meaningless compared to gold in the ground. Amma's portfolio looked weak, her clever move now overshadowed by Efua's single step. The whispers that once mocked Efua now praised her. Brilliant. Unbelievable. She is the woman who broke a billionaire's game. Efua did not flaunt her power. She did not post on Instagram or boast at parties. She simply stood quietly, her dignity intact, while the world realized what she had done. Her silence, once mocked, now carried the weight of a queen. She had not just bought land. She had bought freedom, power, and a future. The shattering truth spread through Accra like thunder. The maid, who everyone dismissed, now held the key to gold that could change the destiny of nations. And with it, she had the power to bring down Kwame Obeng, the man who once laughed as he handed her his card. The game was no longer his. It belonged to her. Kwame paced his massive office, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. The news of Efua's gold-rich land had reached every corner of his empire, and the anger in his chest burned hotter with every passing hour. Finally, he summoned her. He expected her to be nervous, scared, maybe even grateful for his generosity. He imagined her pleading, offering to sell the land back for an impossible sum. When Efua entered, she walked with calm confidence, her uniform still plain, but her presence commanding. Gone was the timid girl who had accepted his card with bowed head. She stood silently for a moment, then sat across from him at the long, polished table. Kwame leaned back in his leather chair, trying to look in control, but his eyes betrayed the slightest flicker of fear. "I assume you understand the position you are in," he said slowly, his voice even but tense. "You own something that could ruin me. I suggest you sell. Name your price, and it will be yours." Efua looked at him steadily, her hands folded neatly on the table. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but each word carried weight. "You told me to buy what I desire," she said. "I have done exactly that. And what I desire is not your approval, not your praise, and certainly not your gifts. I desire freedom, for my people, for myself, and for those who have no voice in this world." Kwame's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, his tone sharp now. "I understand perfectly," Efua replied. Her eyes were steady, unyielding. "That is why I will not sell. Instead, I am partnering with your fiercest competitors. Together, we will build something greater than your empire. One purchase, one choice, has already shifted the balance of power. From this day forward, you will no longer control the game." Kwame's face went pale as he realized the truth of her words. She had turned the table in a single, quiet move, something he had never seen coming. His empire, built over years of deals, influence, and cunning, now faced a new force, one led by a maid who had once been dismissed as weak and simple. Efua rose from the chair slowly, her calm gaze never leaving his. "I came here with respect," she said softly. "But respect does not mean submission. You handed me power. I accepted it, and now it is mine to use." Kwame remained seated, stunned, his confidence shattered. The room, once entirely his, no longer felt like it belonged to him. The game had been flipped, and he was forced to acknowledge that the quiet maid, underestimated by everyone, had become the most powerful player in the room. Outside, the city buzzed with the news of Efua's move. Socialites, rivals, and business leaders whispered her name with a mix of awe and fear. A single act of calm intelligence had turned the tables, proving that real power was never about wealth alone, it was about vision, courage, and knowing exactly what you wanted. Kwame had learned this lesson too late. The city of Accra buzzed with shock and disbelief. Adoa's diamonds, once the symbol of wealth and glamour, now felt worthless. People no longer admired her posts or her designer gowns. They were reminders of how she had been blind to real power. Amma's carefully calculated stock investments crashed under the weight of market shifts and new partnerships. Her cleverness, once praised, now seemed small compared to the quiet, unstoppable force of Efua. Efua, the maid who had carried trays of drinks just weeks ago, was now the most powerful woman in the room. She walked through boardrooms and gala halls with the calm confidence of someone who knew her own strength. Her name was whispered in every corner, a mix of awe and fear. People remembered her humility, her silence, and the single decision that had shifted the entire balance of power in the city. She did not flaunt wealth or shout about her victory. She let the world see her rise quietly, steadily, like a tide that could not be stopped. Kwame Obeng sat in his office, staring at her name in headlines, contracts, and news reports. The arrogance that had once defined him now felt like a distant memory. The card he had given as a joke, thinking it would reveal who could play the game of wealth best, had instead dethroned him. The woman he had underestimated, laughed at, and mocked, had outsmarted him completely. Across the city, business leaders, socialites, and rivals whispered the same thing: the maid had become the queen. Adoa had broken a billionaire with a single, brilliant move, proving that real power was not in wealth alone, but in vision, courage, and the ability to see opportunity when everyone else only saw a joke. In a world obsessed with money and status, the quiet maid had become its most feared and respected player, and no one would ever forget her name.